Imagine being stuck upside down in a space smaller than a washing machine for 27 hours straight, unable to move even a finger, while your heart slowly gives up fighting against gravity. This is exactly what happened to one young man, and his story will make you think twice about tight spaces forever. It was the day before Thanksgiving in 2009. John Jones was a happy 26-year-old medical student who was expecting his second child with his wife Emily. He was home in Utah for the holidays, spending time with his family. John was the kind of person everyone loved, always smiling, great with kids, and someone who put his family first in everything he did. On November 24th, John decided to go on a fun trip with his younger brother Josh and 9 other family members and friends. They wanted to explore something called Nutty Putty Cave, which was located near Salt Lake City. This cave was famous for being perfect for beginners. Thousands of people visit it every year without any problems. At least, that's what everyone thought. But this simple family trip was about to become one of the most horrifying rescue attempts in history. What happened to John Jones in that cave would be so terrible that the authorities would decide to seal the entire cave forever, with his body still inside. Let me tell you the full story, but I must warn you. If tight spaces scare you, this story might give you nightmares. Nutty Putty Cave was first found in 1960. The name sounds funny, but the cave itself was no joke. It was full of narrow tunnels, slippery rocks, and passages that twisted and turned in every direction. To get inside, you had to crawl through a hole that was only 30 inches wide. That's barely wide enough for most adults to fit through. Even though it was called a beginner's cave, Nutty Putty had a dark history. Between 1999 and 2004, many people got stuck inside its narrow passages. One 23-year-old man was trapped for more than 7 hours in almost the exact same spot where John would later get stuck. Another time, a teenager got stuck upside down for an entire night before rescuers could free him. These scary incidents made people worry about the cave's safety. Local officials started calling it a ticking time bomb. They said it was only a matter of time before someone would die there. In 2006, they put a gate at the entrance and locked it shut. But cave explorers were not happy about this. They wrote angry letters to newspapers saying the government had no right to tell them what risks they could take. One person wrote, "I'm tired of the government deciding what is best for us. This cave has been a fun place for me and my sons. We should be able to decide for ourselves what is safe." The fight went on for years. Finally, in March 2009, the cave was reopened with new safety rules. Now people had to get a special permit 21 days before their visit. They also had to bring at least 2 experienced cavers in their group. This is where John Jones comes into the story. John and his brother Josh had not been inside Nutty Putty Cave before, but they had explored many other caves when they were kids. John had even helped his father, who was part of a cave rescue team. As children, John and Josh used to pretend to be trapped victims so the rescue team could practice saving people. But here's the problem. John and Josh hadn't been caving in years. Many people wonder if they really counted as the experienced cavers that the new rules required. On the evening of November 24th, at exactly 8 p.m., John's group entered the cave. At first, everything went perfectly. They spent about an hour in the biggest room of the cave, called the Big Slide. Everyone was having a great time, laughing and exploring. Then Josh and 2 friends decided to challenge each other. They wanted to go deeper into the cave and try one of the hardest parts called the birth canal. This passage was so tight that only very small people could get through it. But if you made it through, you would reach a small room on the other side. John was fit, healthy, and thin. He wasn't worried about tight spaces. He decided to go first, with Josh following behind him. John got down on his stomach and started crawling through what he thought was the entrance to the birth canal. But John had made a terrible mistake. In the darkness, he had taken a wrong turn. Instead of going toward the birth canal, he had crawled into a completely different passage called the corkscrew. This was an unmapped area where only the smallest and most flexible people could fit. As John pushed forward, the passage got tighter and tighter. Soon, he couldn't turn around. But he saw what looked like an opening at the end of the crawl space. So he kept going, thinking he could turn around once he reached it. This decision would cost John his life. John was crawling headfirst into a crack in the rock that was only 10 inches wide and 18 inches tall. To make things worse, this crack went straight down like a slide. To squeeze past a piece of rock sticking out from the wall, John had to breathe in and make his chest as small as possible. Once he got past that rock, his chest expanded again with his normal breathing. Now he was completely trapped in a space about the size of a front-loading washing machine, but he was stuck upside down with his head pointing toward the ground. John tried everything to free himself, but it was impossible. The rock that he had breathed in to get past was now pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. His arms were pinned to his sides. He couldn't bend his legs. He couldn't move at all. That's when he started calling for help. When Josh finally found his brother, he thought it would just be a funny story to tell later that night. But as he looked closer, he realized this was much worse than he had imagined. Josh tried desperately to pull his brother out, but nothing worked. In fact, his pulling made John slide even further down the passage. Now John was completely upside down with both arms trapped against his body. He couldn't move even a finger. Josh knew they needed help immediately. He told one friend to stay with John while he rushed out of the cave to call 911. The nearest cell phone signal was on a hill far from the cave entrance, so it took him a while to make the call. It was now about 9:30 p.m., and John had been stuck for over an hour. Help was coming, but it would take time to arrive. Josh went back into the cave to stay with his brother and wait for the rescue team. The first rescuer arrived at 12:30 a.m. Her name was Susie Mottola, and she was a volunteer with the local rescue team. When she got the emergency call on her pager, she immediately drove to the cave. But when Susie crawled down to where John was trapped, she realized this was much worse than anyone had thought. Susie knew she had to keep John calm, so she spoke to him in a cheerful voice. "Hi, John. Don't worry, we'll have you out of here in no time." John replied, "Hi, Susie. Thank you for coming, but I really want to get out." Susie tried everything she could think of. She even cut off parts of John's jeans to give him a little more room. But after working for 2 hours, she was exhausted and had made no progress. She had to crawl back to the surface, where she found that John's wife Emily and their young daughter had arrived, along with about 30 rescue workers. Everyone was trying to come up with ideas. Some people suggested breaking John's legs to make him smaller. Others wanted to pour gallons of slippery oil on the walls to help slide him out. But they finally decided to use a system of ropes and pulleys to lift John out feet first. They would also drill away some of the rock around him to create more space. But there were big problems with this plan. The rock was very hard to remove, and the pieces that did come off kept falling back down onto John's head. Even worse, only one person could work in the narrow passage at a time, and it took a full hour to carry each piece of equipment down to where John was trapped, 700 feet deep inside the cave. Then the rescue team learned something that made everyone panic. A doctor named Doug Murdoch told them that being upside down for so long would kill John. The human body is designed to stand upright. When you're upside down, your heart has to fight against gravity to pump blood. After several hours, blood and other fluids start to pool in your brain and lungs, making it very hard to breathe. The doctor said John probably only had about 10 hours before his organs would start to fail. But John had already been stuck for more than 15 hours. Susie had noticed this problem early on. Within the first hour of trying to help John, she heard a rattling sound coming from his chest. This meant that fluid was already building up in his lungs, and he was starting to suffocate. The rescue team worked as fast as they could. They set up their first pulley system and started trying to lift John out of his trap. His legs and feet couldn't bend around the curve of the passage, and the piece of rock that had trapped him kept catching on his chest. As one rescuer said, it was the worst possible place to be stuck, but amazingly, they managed to lift him up just a little bit. For the first time in many hours, John was in a slightly better position. The rescue team was able to give him some fluids through an IV tube to help him stay strong. Then disaster struck. The pulley system broke, and John slid back down to where he started. He was now even more stuck than before. John was starting to panic, so the rescue team brought a radio into the cave so he could talk to his wife, Emily. She told him how much she loved him, and that everything would be okay. This helped keep John calm, while the rescuers set up a second, stronger pulley system. After 19 hours of being trapped, a team of 8 rescuers was ready to try again. They had 137 volunteers working on the rescue operation, but only a few could fit in the narrow passage where John was stuck. Each time they pulled on the ropes, John screamed in pain. They had to stop several times to avoid breaking his legs. But then, on the third pull, something amazing happened. John was lifted high enough that he could make eye contact with his rescuer. The rescuer later said that John's eyes were red and his face was dirty, but he seemed okay. When the rescuer asked how he was feeling, John said, "It sucks. I'm upside down. I can't believe I'm upside down. My legs are killing me." Even though John was complaining, the rescuers saw that he had a smile on his face. They thought they were finally going to save him. But then came the fourth pull, and everything went wrong. The system that was holding John in place suddenly failed. A bolt that had been drilled into the cave wall came loose, causing part of the cave to crumble. This hit the lead rescuer in the face, knocking him unconscious for a moment. Even worse, John slid back down into the crack, and this time he went deeper than ever before. When the rescuers recovered from the shock, they realized that John was no longer responding to them. He wasn't talking, and he seemed to be unconscious. A second rescuer took over and somehow managed to get a rope around John's waist. But this rescuer also got stuck and needed help from other team members. Several rescuers were injured trying to save John. A third rescuer made one last desperate attempt. He drilled frantically at the rock around John, trying to create enough space to pull him free. But it was too late. The entire rescue team was exhausted. John was barely breathing and was completely unresponsive. His heart had been working against gravity for so long that it finally gave up. He had gone into cardiac arrest. At this point, Emily was told what was happening. Technically, John was still alive, but he was unconscious, and his heart was failing. Emily refused to believe that her husband was dying from such a simple mistake. In one of her final radio conversations with John, she said, I know you've been pushing so hard for so long. Why don't you rest for a minute and take a break, and then you can push again?" But the rescuers knew the truth. They sent a brave paramedic down to check John's pulse. At 11:56 p.m. on November 25, 2009, John Edward Jones was pronounced dead. He had been trapped for 28 hours. Emily was in complete shock. She couldn't believe that a simple family trip had ended with her husband's death. She refused to accept that he was really gone. The rescue team promised Emily that they would do everything possible to bring John's body back to the surface. But after discussing their options, they realized it would be impossible. Even if they could somehow free John's lifeless body, it wouldn't be able to twist and bend the way a living person could. The passage was simply too narrow and complicated. Even worse, trying to remove the body would put more rescue workers in terrible danger. The team had already been through enough, so a difficult decision was made. They would seal the entrance to Nutty Putty Cave with concrete, leaving John's body inside forever. The cave would become his tomb. John's family was heartbroken, but they understood. They had a metal plaque made and placed it at the sealed entrance. Later, they released a statement describing John as someone with a good nature, delightful sense of humor, strong work ethic, genuine love of people, masterful ability to relate to children, love of and unwavering faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and commitment to his family as an amazing husband, father, son, and brother. To this day, John's body remains inside Nutty Putty Cave. The cave has been permanently closed to the public since 2009. What was once a popular place for adventure seekers is now a concrete sealed tomb, serving as a reminder of how quickly a fun family trip can turn into an unimaginable tragedy. The story of John Jones shows us that even experienced people can make deadly mistakes in dangerous places. John wasn't reckless or careless. He was just a loving husband and father who wanted to have some fun with his family during the holidays. One wrong turn in the darkness changed everything. The rescue workers who tried to save John were heroes. They worked for 27 hours straight, trying everything they could think of. Many of them still have nightmares about that day. One rescuer said it was the hardest case he had worked on in 29 years of search and rescue. John's wife Emily eventually remarried and had more children, but she still visits the sealed cave entrance sometimes to remember her first husband. She has said that John would want people to learn from his story and be more careful when exploring dangerous places. The Nutty Putty Cave incident changed how people think about caving safety. Many caves now have stricter rules, better emergency equipment, and more training for rescue teams. John's death was not meaningless if it helps prevent others from facing the same fate. But perhaps the most important lesson from this story is simpler than all the safety rules and equipment. It's that we should never take our loved ones for granted. John left for what he thought would be a few hours of fun and adventure. He never came home. Life can change in an instant, and we should cherish every moment we have with the people we care about. John Edward Jones was just 26 years old when he died. He was studying to become a doctor so he could help children with heart problems. He had so much life ahead of him. Watching his daughter grow up, meeting his new baby, becoming the doctor he dreamed of being. All of that was taken away in one terrible moment when he made a wrong turn in the darkness. Today, if you drive past the place where Nutty Putty Cave used to be, you'll see nothing but a concrete seal and a small plaque. But underneath that concrete lies the body of a young man who just wanted to spend some quality time with his family during the holidays. The next time you're with your loved ones, remember John's story. Hug them a little tighter. Tell them you love them. And maybe think twice before crawling into any tight spaces underground. Some adventures just aren't worth the risk.